How many of you know what psychological safety is? You've heard the term psychological safety before. Okay, a few of you, that's good. How many believe that psychological safety is important in the workplace and contributes to improved well-being? Okay, good. Many of you, probably why you're here. And I'm very grateful that you're here because it's an important discussion. And how many of you don't know what psychological safety is, or maybe even don't care about it? A couple of you. I appreciate you being here anyway. In fact, differences of opinion for me is important and valuable, particularly in the world that we find ourselves in today. And actually, it kind of lends itself to the discussion that we're here to have. I don't want everyone to agree or be on the same page. The next hour is an opportunity for us to discuss, explore, have some discourse and debate around what is the right way forward, rather than telling you this is the way it is. And actually, part of psychological safety is our ability to question and challenge things. So if you don't think this is important, but you showed up here anyway, I'm as grateful to you as the ones that showed up here because you do feel it's important. Because hopefully, between us, we've got over 600 people, well, almost 600 people signed up. Hopefully, we'll have a few hundred that show up. Hopefully, we can figure out why this is important and how we take it forward in our own unique way. I'm not here to tell you what's right or what's wrong or tell you what you should and shouldn't do. I'm here to literally plant some seeds and for you guys to nurture that seed in a way that is right for you and your organizations. Who am I? My name is Neil Sharp. I founded an organization called the Stress Management Society, which is now an international non-profit organization that has been operating for 20 years and a couple of weeks. We literally a few weeks ago celebrated our 20-year anniversary, which is a huge milestone achievement for us. And in that period of time, at the last count, we reached more than 100 million people with the various different campaigns, programs, and projects that we've been involved with, which is an incredible achievement. But we're far from done. We came into existence with a vision of creating a happier, healthier, more resilient world. Despite lack of effort, it feels like we're further away from that goal today than when we came into existence in 2003, because the world seems to get more challenging. And this is where I'm really grateful for people such as yourselves that are showing up to have these discussions, because collectively, I feel that we can make the world a better place. We do have a commercial consultancy arm, which is how we pay our bills, and through which we do consultancy work with some of the biggest companies on the planet. At the moment, we're working with companies like Philips and Mars, Santander, and various others to be able to drive corporate and cultural change, which in turn helps to fund all our non-commercial activities and programs like what we're putting on today. So what is this session that we have here? If you thought this was an opportunity to eat your lunch and watch some guy waffling on in the background whilst you work on a spreadsheet on another screen, sadly, it's not that kind of session. Regardless of the fact that there might be quite a lot of people on today's session, it is a workshop. It's an interactive discussion. And many of you from the faces and names I'm seeing on the screen may have attended some of our programs before and will know that actually you will have an opportunity to contribute to this discussion and to be engaged. So one of the things that I request kindly, given the sensitive nature of the conversation we're here to explore, is if you can, please put your cameras on. Why? We're here to talk about psychological safety. How many would agree it doesn't feel quite as safe when you've got initials on a screen with no idea if there's a person there who's watching and who's listening? How many agree that psychological safety is impacted by the virtual environment with black holes on your screen? So if you can, and thank you, so many of you are putting your cameras on, I really appreciate that. It means that we're talking to real people, which allows us to feel more safe rather than a character that's tapping away on the keyboard, but you have no idea if there's a real human being behind it. It's not a lecture, it's an interactive session. We will have opportunities for you to get involved. This is your session, not mine. You've invested your most valuable resource to be here today, which is your time. I'm here to facilitate, not to teach, not to lecture. So I want to hear from you. When I ask questions, they're actual questions, not rhetorical ones. So feel free to jump in at any moment. You can unmute yourself. You don't need to ask for permission. I'm not a school teacher, so just you can unmute yourself. You can put your message into the chat box. My colleagues, Johnny and Jess, are here to support as well. So they will, if you don't feel comfortable sharing the microphone, they'll be able to bring your comments in. I want you to disagree with me, seek clarification, tell me to slow down if you need to. Whatever you need, I'm here to support. So if you haven't already, what would be really nice if you put your name and where you are in the world into the chat function, just so we make sure your technology is working, but also get a sense of who's here today and where are you from. If you don't have cameras, I see your apologies. That's great. No worries. Thank you. But obviously, do your best to engage as much as you can. So I know we've got someone from the USA. I think it was Myrna. I'm not sure whereabouts in the US you are. If you're West Coast, it's the middle of the night. So well done for getting up early. Hopefully, you're on the East Coast and it's crack of dawn. So yeah, wherever you are, welcome. Because of the nature of the conversation, there are just some ground rules that I'd like to share. These are not my rules. These are your rules. These are just suggestions. You can disagree with any of these at any point. If you feel happy and comfortable with them, then this is essentially the frame around the container of this discussion, just so we all feel safe to open up and be able to share freely. We only have a short amount of time, so we're encouraging you to be present. If you can, put your other technology off, put it on silent, just for the next hour. See if you can approach today's session as an exercise in mindfulness, being present in this moment with no judgment. So essentially, if you can disengage from anything else that's likely to distract you, it means that you'll be more able to be present to our discussions here today. Participate. What you put out will determine what you get back. So if you sit there silently, passively, say nothing, do nothing, don't get involved, you're limiting the amount of benefit you're going to get from this session. So please do get involved, share your thoughts, feelings, and perspectives. Be open, honest, but also respectful. If somebody shares something that you don't like or you don't agree with, that's okay. They're entitled to their opinion and you're entitled to yours. So ultimately, it's actually absolutely fine for us to agree to disagree on this session. Have an open mind to new ways of doing things, new approaches, and new strategies. If there are things that are shared today that you don't like, don't agree with, after 1 o'clock UK time, GMT, translate that to wherever in the world you're from, you don't need to explore them again. But you never know. By having an open mind, you might be presented with something that could be really powerful in changing your experience and the experiences of the people that you work with, your colleagues or your community. Ask for confidentiality, so things that are shared here in this session, particularly things of a personal nature, people's personal stories and experiences. If somebody does share something of a personal nature, can I have everyone's express commitment that you will not share that outside of this session? I want people to feel safe to open up and share comfortably. There are only 2 caveats to confidentiality. Essentially, what we're talking about here is Vegas rules. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So essentially what I'm requesting is what happens and is discussed and shared in this session stays in this session. The only caveats to that are anything that myself or my colleagues share, you have our permission to share that with anyone that's willing to listen. Any of our stories, case studies, analogies, we're giving you permission to share that. And the only other caveat is if anything is shared in this session that impacts your safety or the safety of others for safeguarding reasons, that's the only other time that confidentiality will be broken. So are we all happy with the ground rules? We're happy to agree to the framing around this session. Great, fantastic. Thank you, everybody. So the buzzword, psychological safety. A couple of years ago, most people had never even heard the term psychological safety. Now it seems to be one of the first things that comes up in our conversation with people leaders and HR managers and line managers. But what does psychological safety mean to you? What is this? I'd love to hear from some of you. So if you'd like to share, just unmute yourself. Let me know your thoughts on this. What does this mean to you? Okay, so some people say mental well-being, looking after your health. What else? Trust.
To be protected from a mental health perspective.
Okay, Liz.
So protected.
To feel protected, but what does that look like from a practical perspective?
To feel safe and secure, and to not have any attacks, and to actually feel that it's a very positive, supportive experience rather than anything damaging to one's mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I see lots of hands going up. So Leanne, you've got your hand up. Is there something you'd like to share? Nina, I see you've got your hand up as well. Pete McGowan, Lucy Holloway, you've also got your hands up. If there's something you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. Daisy, any of you guys?
I can just say that I think psychological safety means that you're able to raise any concerns without any fear of repercussions or pressure, depending on how you say it.
Absolutely, being able to kind of, share your thoughts, feelings, perspectives without fear of repercussions. I think that's super important. Let's get some feedback. Jarmy, can you do me a favour? Could you just mute those that aren't speaking, just for feedback?
Yeah, cool.
And while you're there, Jarmy, is there anything you'd like to share from the chat of what people are suggesting psychological safety is from the chat?
Well, that was my next point of call. So we've had some really good suggestions. I won't put anyone on the spot and say who's done anything, because maybe you don't want to put your names out there. But we've had the thoughts like having a work culture where conversations are open, honest, and transparent, especially around well-being and mental health. We've had all mental health aspects that help to keep myself safe, which is brilliant. Somewhere where you can be yourself, not be afraid to make mistakes, ask questions, feeling comfortable to be able to share your views and ideas.
Great, thank you. I see a couple more hands up. Myrna and Segun, have you guys something you'd like to share? If you would,
Hello,
please.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'm coming at it from the someone with disability needs. So I'm visually and hearing impaired, and so it's having that safety to be able to talk to, that safe space to be able to share your concerns with either your manager or your supervisor, and also being listened to, because it usually affects someone's mental well-being and all whatnot when you think there's a secondary victimization going on. So it's important.
Absolutely. And just seeing the last few messages in the chat, not feeling bullied or not feeling or being threatened during conversation interaction with others, okay to express ideas and concerns, speak up with questions. Trust, once it's broken, is very difficult to build trust again. These are all really, very, really valuable sort of inputs. And from our perspective, our belief is psychological safety is the freedom to express our thoughts, ideas, opinions, and concerns without fear of repercussion. It's something that essentially is it should be entrenched in the culture of freedom of speech, where we can express ourselves without fear of repercussions. But how many would agree the world doesn't feel like a psychologically safe place at the moment? Forget the workplace, the world itself. Expressing a view or an opinion that seems to be outside of the accepted narrative could lead to you being cancelled, for you to have serious repercussions, which is why so many people are struggling, because even simply asking questions on certain subjects, I won't list which one, because right now the world feels like an episode of Black Mirror, and some of this stuff that's going on is absolutely crazy. I don't know where the scriptwriter got this plot line from, but Hollywood could take a leaf out of real life's book right now. And when it's that crazy, I think it's important that we're able to ask questions and challenge and discuss and debate. I'm not saying for a second I know what's right and wrong, but I value the ability to ask questions and to explore, whether that's at a micro level within your organization or your team, your family or your community, or at a broader level, at a national or an international level. And this is really why this subject is more important today than ever before. So we have created a model. When I say we, that's us collectively, but to give full credit, Jarmy, if you give us a wave, it was Jarmy's brains that were behind this. She came up with a model which we call the 4 stages of psychological safety. We created it for one of our bigger corporate clients, and this is the first opportunity we've had to share it with the broader public. And we're really grateful for all of you for turning up today, because I think it's really important that we have the ability to share all of this great content that we're creating with the broadest possible audience, and for you guys to take this information and share it with anyone that's willing to listen. 4 stages to psychological safety, and we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail, but it's inclusion. And I'm not talking about this from the kind of diversity, inclusivity, equality playbook. That's a separate conversation. I'm talking, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe, what food you eat, what God you pray to, what book you read. It doesn't matter. We all have a place in the human civilization. And in any workplace, we often hear buzzwords like bring your whole self to work, which is a great buzzword, but often it's not actually the case. We can't bring our full selves because we can't always fully express ourselves. How do we create an environment where it's safe within reason? Obviously, when we say people fully expressing themselves, there are boundaries to that, that doesn't negatively affect those around them. But how can we create cultures of true inclusivity? Safety to learn, which means it must be okay for us to make mistakes and get it wrong and ask questions and challenge. And which is obviously where the next point comes in, is the safety to challenge, whether that's to challenge your colleagues in an appropriate, healthy way, not attacking, but challenging to learn and grow, whether that's to our colleagues, to our team members, to our line manager, to our leadership, to our organization, to our government, whoever it is. We should be safe to ask questions and challenge, but also to contribute. Culture is not down to 1 or 2 individuals to create. Everybody that participates in that community, whether it's a small community of a handful of people or a global community of 7 billion human beings, we all have something to contribute. Are we all safe to contribute? So this is our 4 steps, and really what we would absolutely, Stephen, I totally agree with your comment there, and apologies if I don't keep up with the chat. Johnny will bring in important comments, but it's calling people in rather than calling people out. Nobody is the enemy. You know, for many generations, for thousands of years, people came together and settled their differences by the fire, or found ways to healthily and appropriately settle their beefs. Often it resulted in conflict, but there were, in times gone by, there were healthier ways for communities to settle their differences, rather than creating more and more enemies. And it feels like anyone with an X or an Instagram or a Facebook account can start kind of calling people out and questioning and challenging them. And that's meant that a lot of people don't feel safe to contribute, don't feel safe to share their voices. So this is really where we need to consider that, yes, this is a challenge, but we can make things better. How can we achieve that? How do we create this environment, both at a micro and a macro level, where people feel they can challenge and contribute and learn and feel included? So there's kind of twofold approach to this. What strategies, methodologies, and technique could you implement into your particular environment that you are a part of? And what are the initiatives and tools to help you begin? Now, let's look at the difference between the two. What is a strategy and what is an initiative? What is the difference between the two? Actual question, not a rhetorical one. Difference between a strategy and an initiative.
The strategy is the plan, the initiative is the idea.
Yeah, well, I guess the way I would look at it is the initiatives are the pieces of the jigsaw, the various little bits that you've got to put together. The strategy is the picture on the front of the jigsaw puzzle box, right? So you need to have the picture to know, are you assembling the pieces in the correct way? Do you have the right pieces? Are there any pieces missing? And really, this is kind of the separation of the two. The psychological safety strategy is the big picture. What do we want to achieve? And the initiatives are how. So the strategies, the what, or the why, and the initiatives are the how. And this is really where we're going to spend a bit of time exploring sort of how we can kind of take this forward. And Stephen, there's a gold star for you there, because you've dropped something in which I think a lot of people are going to be taking away and sharing as broadly as they can. So thank you so much for your contribution. going to break this down into the 4 different areas. So what can we do to build this picture of psychological safety? But before we get to that, what does it look like? Let's say that we are put in charge, that all 26 of us that are here today are put in charge of the global psychological, the Global Psychological Safety Council, right? So we are basically responsible for creating a global culture of psychological safety. Before we get to what do we do, what's the picture on the front of the box? What does it look like when we've achieved this? How is the world a different place? Because obviously, if we look at it from a big picture perspective, I'm hoping you can channel this and take this away to apply in your local settings, in your groups, in your communities, in your teams, in your workplaces. But if we were to achieve success, what does success look like at the end of this journey? We've created, this group here have worked together to create a psychologically safe world. What does the world look like? I love that, Lindsay. Connected, comfortable, reassuring. Yeah, go for it.
I'd say it would be full of kind of happy, confident people who are able to kind of speak up, speak their mind, challenge other people.
Mm-hmm. And Nikki, may I ask, in this world that we have created, what does it feel like if you speak up, challenge, or ask questions that are uncomfortable?
It feels empowering, I think.
Okay. Rather than people coming from a place of fear of repercussions, actually people are encouraged and they feel empowered when they do so, right? That's wonderful.
And able to express curiosity without fear of, like you said earlier on, that whole kind of cancel culture, I think, is so toxic, and it scares people. You know, people have stopped talking and debating about things, I think.
Absolutely. Rather than a one-way narrative where we are told, well, this is the way it is and you must accept that this is going to happen, or this is the way things are done, or this is the decision that's made. So, well, it should be okay to ask, well, why? And from a place of curiosity, not like I'm saying you're wrong or I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist, but I genuinely want to understand. And if you can help me to understand, then I'm on board with it, right? So we work together to find the best way forward. Great. I love that. Dil, you've got your hand up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it would be a world where you put principles before personalities, because I think that's a big one. Like people, you know, and despite everyone's best intentions, people's personalities can definitely get the better of them.
Of course. And that's such an interesting point, and I really do agree with that. And this is, for me, the difference between political correctness and moral correctness. How many would agree that political correctness changes over time, right? What was politically correct at one point in time is not okay today, right? There are many things that have happened over the last couple of 100 years where at one point in time it was actually normal behavior. And now it's like, oh my God, that's completely inappropriate. Because political correctness changes. And it will continue to change. What is politically correct today won't be politically correct in 10 or 20 years' time. What does stand the test of time is moral correctness. What is the difference between political correctness and moral correctness? And let me kind of rephrase the question. If you're looking at someone that is a good person based on political correctness and someone that's a good person based on moral correctness, what's the difference between the two?
I think, is it the intention? You know, because if you might say something wrong in terms of political correctness, but it's your morals might be right, you just don't know the language, you know, kind of thing. So but you could be saying you could be politically correct, but underneath it you might not be. Your morals might be questionable. I don't know, just an idea.
Absolutely. Chris and Michael, you've got your hands up as well. And this is an important point. And I see some messages in the chat box as well. Chris and Michael, if you've got something to share on this, that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, it's all morally, politically, and it derives into personalities as well, because political correctness is stated out to us. It's telling us how we should behave. what we should expect. Moral can only be from your inner peace, from yourself. So your own moral compass will allow you to say things or not say things, because morally to you, that's, you know, you can't, when I was at school, you can't talk like we spoke at school, because now now what was accepted to be morally to us then is now politically incorrect.
Absolutely.
And getting back to the last guy's comment about personality, a lot of the restrictions that we have as people plays out on how our personality is. So for me, opening up and being in a safe place to speak, I can only speak from my own experiences. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I joined secondary school. So I got all the way through primary and nobody had noticed. Back then, when I was growing up, you were put in what they called the naughty boys or the thick class. Now, it's not because I'm thick and it's not because I'm naughty. It's just because my dyslexia didn't allow me to progress as quick as everybody else. And it's only been within the last, so 7 years ago, that changed for me and allowed me an opportunity to create that safe space where we talk about dyslexia a lot. Dyslexia does not stop you from learning. You just got to find the way that you can learn the best. So for me and my learning, my dyslexia is all based around stress. So I can sit right now with you guys, read everything off the screen because I'm calm, I'm comfortable, everything's okay. You change the mood and say, right, Chris, it's the same bit of paper you've just read, but there's your test. That word test sends me into fear. That makes me clam up. And you can take it with, I use dyslexia as the topic, but we can put that topic onto anything. But it's creating that safe space where morally or politically, you are able to come in. And as you do, and many people don't, you touch base on religion. Come in and talk about it. Talk freely about it. Let's be open, you know. And we're the company I work for, we have a campaign that's been running for a while now. We call it Step In and Stop It. So the company had to announce broadly across the board to say to all members of staff, you have the right to step in and stop it. You have the right to question what's going on. If you don't feel it's right, if you don't feel it's safe, step in and stop it. Get somebody to come up and explain what's going on. So I feel that it's all about, you know, we've stopped talking. As human beings, we've been mediaized to think like this, behave like this. COVID didn't help because it kept us all apart. You know, I sit there and watch my children at night and then they're glued to this tablet or telephone. And I'm like, what are you doing? I'm talking to me mates. Well, why don't you pick the phone up and have a phone call? Why don't you actually speak to each other? You know, have a real in-depth conversation. It's, you know, these sort of things as humans, we've stopped being able to do it. We don't know how to do it anymore. So we're now going down this, everything's done digitally. We can't have a phone call. It's got to be a text or an email or a WhatsApp or a Teams. You know, for me, I want to get people back in the room because that's where the real change happens.
Thank you, Chris. No, you're right, and that's why I'm really grateful. There's 200 plus of us here on a call together. I can see many of you to have this conversation because this is how we create change. Rather than waiting for someone to tell us how to do it, we come together, we find the way. And Jerry, I couldn't have put it better myself. Political correctness would change constantly to follow what is right at the time. Moral correctness stands the test of time. What was morally the right thing to do 2,000 or 3,000 years ago is still true today. Would you agree with that? Being a good human being stands the test of time. It is about love, compassion, empathy. It's about looking out for each other. And this is really what, for me, underpins this kind of whole approach with psychological safety, is what is morally correct, as opposed to what is the topic du jour. And this is really where I want to share some ideas and just to get some feedback from you on what we can do. So firstly, around sort of inclusion, just noticed, Bita, you put your hand up. Is there something you'd like to share before we move on to some ideas around inclusion? Oh, so, and Rob, you've got your hand up as well. No worries. If you guys want to share, feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't know that someone was before me. I was just going to make a quick comment on the language of morality, and how that can be quite a loaded term, I think, and it's got some problematic elements to it that have connotations to religion. I think organized religion, which to some people can be, some people have been subjects of the, shall we say, moral police of religions, you know, whatever religion that may be. And I, you know, this is maybe it's just a personal thing, but I think it's a useful sort of discussion to have in a way. And that ethics, I think, is to me, ethics is more about treatment of one human being to another, and morality can be about it traditionally can be about prescribing certain behaviors as right and certain ones as wrong, that that is not a kind of secular sense of like a humanist sort of approach, if that makes any sense.
No, Rob, it's actually a really good point. I guess, you know, I'm a religious. I don't mean to cause any offence to anyone that has a strong religious faith. I don't do religion. I grew up in a pretty religious household, and when I use the term sort of morals or morality, I'm kind of just going according to the vision of the world that my father gave me, which was what it is to be a good person and to care about people beyond yourself, etc. I do take on board the fact that there are many of these phrases that have been co-opted, and morality, yes, as you say, has been co-opted as a religious terminology for many, which essentially attaches potentially some stigma to it. What I'm talking about, and maybe there is a better word, which I'm totally open to hearing, what I'm talking about is what it means to be a good human being, not as prescribed by a religion or a doctrine or some kind of philosophical kind of approach. You know, from within yourself. I think someone had shared it earlier. We know what it is to be a good person. So yeah, I appreciate that, Rob, and you know, if anyone's got any further suggestions as to how we can change that terminology for future sessions and move away from moral correctness or morality to something that's a little bit more inclusive.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I think everyone knows what ethics is, but I think it's just a kind of secular, if you like, a secular version of morality, and that's probably quite a good term, yeah.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. We're always constantly striving to be more inclusive, and if by changing our language we can do so, that would be great. Which actually is a really nice segue, because you know what I want to talk about now is inclusion, is ensuring that we have an approach and frameworks and language that allows what we're sharing to be fully inclusive, particularly around sort of feedback communication channels, the way that we ask the question, having information that is accessible for all, where we can we can ask the questions, we are able to listen, there is a 360-degree feedback in place. What I'd like to spend a few minutes exploring is what can we do in our quest to have the right pieces of the psychological safety puzzle in place. What can we do to be more inclusive to all? And particularly for those that look at and feel and approach life differently to the mainstream. I think this is really where, regardless of what their background beliefs are, you know, where they're coming from, everyone has a place. How can we create an environment where it's inclusive to all? So, Katie, can I pick up on what you just shared there, listening without judgment? Would you mind sharing what that actually means to you, if possible? Just a bit more as to what does listening without judgment mean for any of you that put that in?
I can try.
Thank you.
It's basically just giving people space and the opportunity to say what they need to say. And I guess it goes beyond even listening and just letting people be who they are, accepting them, you know, for the person that they are, and listening to the things that they have to say, not with the intent of responding or waiting for your turn, but with the intent of genuinely listening to what it is that they have to say.
I absolutely. And Katie, may I just ask, what if someone is sharing something that goes against what you believe or how you see things? Because this is really where we put it to the test. It's easy to listen without judgment to people that see the world the same way we do. Well, what about when people don't?
I think this is a skill that we've lost to a large degree as a society as a whole. You know, like you mentioned before, people used to sit around the fires and hash things out, and everybody's entitled to their opinion, and we should be people who can sit down and have a discussion with people we disagree with. We don't have to agree. We don't have to try to convince them that we're right. All we have to do is listen and then expect the same from them and discuss things like, you know, 2, 3, 4, whatever people just trying to get by and be who they are and, you know, share and connect.
Absolutely, Katie. And I think this, for me, is so important. Do you want to live your life in an echo chamber? And social media has created a lot of echo chambers. You see the world according to who's on your feed and who the algorithm is connecting you with. But actually, there's a world beyond that. And actually, unless we're exposed to ideas and beliefs beyond what is in our echo chamber, how do we learn and grow? How do we expand our awareness? The world is not black and white, and there are so many issues, particularly over the last 3 years, and it obviously was pronounced during COVID, but beyond that, how many different issues have we seen, and wars and challenges and so on and so forth, where people are trying to deduce it to black and white, right and wrong, good and bad, and it's not like that, unless we're really willing to listen and understand. That means sometimes listening to uncomfortable things, so I absolutely agree with that. Sharon, I love that you dropped in our unconditional positive regard. I'm assuming you are you've obviously brought that in from the Champions program. Rachel and Neil, I saw you had your hands up. Would you like to share?
It's Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
I think taking a second just to listen almost downplays the importance of listening. So we can all talk, but the most important thing I think is that while we're talking, people are listening. And I think I want to add about the question about listening without judgment. I can't push my judgment away. I can choose what I do with it because my judgment is in me and I can hold it in me and choose not to push it out there, but I can't turn it off. It's very, very hard to turn off whatever is going on inside you. And I think of that as judgment. I am considering what somebody's saying against my own morals and my own ethics. But I absolutely choose at what point I speak about it. And I think it goes back again to listening. Listening is so, so important in all our conversations. If nobody's listening, it's not a conversation. It's a lot of people talking. So I think I want to just reinforce that thing about it's not just taking a second to listen. Some of us need to be listening a lot.
And absolutely. And you know, Rachel, one of the things that I found that's really fascinating is if someone says something that causes a reaction or triggers you, it's only because there's something there to be triggered. In a way, that person has brought a gift to you to reflect on what is it within you that still needs to be healed or resolved. And this person is giving you an opportunity to be able to find peace with whatever within you is reacting to what that person is sharing, if that makes sense. And, you know, if we want to create a psychologically safe environment outside of ourselves, we need to be willing to do the same within ourselves. And sadly, many of us are walking around with an unsafe interior interior environment, psychological safety. Because we censor ourselves, we shut ourselves down, we don't feel right to challenge or contribute within ourselves. So this is one of the things that I think is really powerful. As many of you said, communication, that you are listening not with the intent of waiting for a pause in the dialogue so you can share your perspective. Listening for the purpose of listening. Not sitting there preparing what you're going to say next. Absolutely. Second, as you said, you know, self-awareness is a really crucial part of this. Talk like you're right, listen like you're wrong. I like that, Claire. So these are just some ideas. With all the best will and intention in the world, we're not going to be able to kind of cover everything in this short amount of time today. But just really wanted to plant the seeds, the kind of things that we can do. The next one, beyond inclusion, is the safety to learn. What can we do to increase the ability to create a culture or an environment where it's safe to learn? I'm not talking about like, safe to go to school or safe to read a book. I'm talking about being able to learn in the areas of life that are currently challenging and uncomfortable. For example, a great example of something where it's not easy to learn, because it's not easy to ask questions, the conflict in the Middle East. It's a very complex situation. It's not a black and white situation. There is so much to this story. But to ask questions with the purpose of wanting to learn could leave you labeled one way or another, all right? If you say the wrong thing or ask the wrong questions. How do we create the safety? Or, for example, like COVID was, for me, one of the first opportunities that I saw really where this was brought to the fore. We're asking questions where I really want to learn what's going on here. I want to really understand. And it was, no, you can't ask questions. And now, obviously, with the inquiry that's happening in the UK, we've seen that actually a lot of the questions that people had in their minds that didn't ask were valid questions. But it wasn't safe to learn. It wasn't safe for us to be able to express ourselves and our concerns. So, Janice, you've got your hand up. What are your thoughts around what do we need to do to make it more safe to learn?
Just to sort of say, my chat seems to have been turned off the entire time. It's been a bit frustrating. I don't know, it was probably at my end, but it's a really interesting discussion. And I wanted to mention earlier, something I'm interested in is the principles of non-violent communication. And I was just wondering if anybody had any reflection on that, sort of how we ask questions, and it's something that's been around for a while, but seems to have become less sort of popular. And I just thought that was quite an interesting concept that I'm really wanting to explore a bit more. And I think links to this. Anyway, I don't have an answer, but I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, and absolutely, I absolutely agree that non-violent communication is everyone in a leadership position should be trained on, and that would probably make the world a significantly better place. But yeah, the way that we communicate, and also coming back to the point of listening without judgment, that encouraging people to ask questions rather than shutting the questions down. That would mean that people, as has already been expressed, would feel more empowered. Chris, you've got your hand up. Is there anything that you'd like to add around sort of how can we create an environment where it is safe for us to learn?
For me, again, all of us can only speak about our own personal experiences and things like that. For any of this to work, you've got to start with yourself. And there are three things that are in us, all of us: mindset, attitude, and behavior. If you have a poor mindset, you're going to have a bad attitude, and your behavior is going to follow suit. And it is only the mindset that you need to change. So I took my dyslexia 6-7 years ago, and I turned that into my superpower. Okay. We create a space where you come into a training room with myself, and you don't have to be ashamed of anything. And you have to ask the questions. Anybody got learning difficulties? And you'll see most people, wait for the next person to put that. And I just open up. I let them know about my superpower. I'm dyslexic, but I'm still qualified. I still managed to get to the place where I needed to be. So interaction, rather than being deaf by PowerPoint, which lots of training sessions are, we kill the PowerPoint. Let's get interactive. Let's talk. Let's make it real. Let's make it real. Do you work in a classroom like this every day of the week? No. Where do you work? And this starts drawing people out and giving them the confidence to actually, hey, Chris, I work and I'm working here, and with this, this is going. It's great. And you just and like you say about mentoring each other, it's about supporting that person that hasn't said anything all day, and that moment they open up because they've felt the floor's there for them to speak. You've got to support and encourage it. For any of these strategies, morals, any of it to work, it's got to start with ourselves. You've got to want to be part of it, because if you don't, it's not going to happen, is it? You know, that's
now, and Chris, can I just play with you for a second? Like you've shared a contribution, and let's say this contribution isn't what everybody else agrees with, and is not what I agree with, right? Let's just kind of take two approaches, but we're just playing, right? We're just having a bit of fun. Chris, what you just shared is absolute nonsense. I can't believe you shared that. That's absolute nonsense. Don't agree with you. Please don't share anything again. All right. That's one approach. Now, it's not just the impact it has on you. I've shut you down. For all the other 200 people listening, what's just happened? You've observed this interaction. Someone has made a contribution. They're trying to learn and grow and share their ideas. What has just happened to everybody else when they've seen the so-called expert teacher facilitator shutting down a question? It's awkward, yeah, but what else has happened?
You're gonna put these individuals into a space where now they're going to make a judgment. The judgment's either going to be about what I've spoken about because you've highlighted it, or the judgment's going to be about you and how you closed my topic down. Whether my topic was right or wrong, it's irrelevant. The whole point is the conversation. And right, okay, so you don't agree with what I say. How do you feel about the matter? What's your opinion? You know, what do you know? What's your experiences?
So, Chris, it's interesting because as many people have said, I've lost the room. I've not just shut you down, I've shut everyone down. It's not just safe for you to express, it's not safe for anyone else to express. Now, let's just say it's the same thing. What you're sharing is not what we're looking for. It's not necessarily what fits into the bigger picture, but I take a different approach. I really appreciate your contribution, Chris, and that's really valuable. What else could we do? How else could we approach this? How else could we contribute to this? Now, it's not that I'm saying you're right or wrong. I'm valuing your input, but I'm still keeping it open because I'm looking for more, right? Now, rather than shutting you down, I said yes, and what else? Rather than no, but what else? Does that make sense? And
yeah.
How many of you have found, like, you know, that was one of the challenges I faced at school. It was right or wrong, and you were shut down if it was wrong, rather than, okay, that's one way of looking at things. How else could we look at it? And this is what we want, is exactly, Sarah, as you said, facilitating contribution and conversation. Essentially, what we're looking for is the verbal equivalent of Aikido. If any of you are familiar with the martial art of Aikido, it's very different to other forms of martial art. In many forms of martial art, it's your presence, your strength, your focus. Aikido, the more aggression the attacker uses against you, the more you've got to use back at them, because you are literally taking the energy and diverting it back. Does that make sense? So if someone comes with a challenging or uncomfortable contribution, it's like, okay, great, I take it, and we bring it back. What does everyone else think about this? Let's work together to find a consensus that we're all on board with. Because if we did this within our organizations or even at our national level, and you had an opportunity to contribute, would we be making the kind of decisions that are made by a few because other people don't feel safe to challenge, to ask questions, and to learn?
Sort of links with what you said before about your choice of words. For me, if I'm having a conversation with you like just then, and you drop in, but. But's a very dismissive word for me. But as you've just said but to me, and that tells me that you're not interested in anything I've got to say because we're going down another route. However, if you'd have changed your but for a what if, yeah,
or
it's not
dismissive. How about an
and?
And? How about
or an and? And
yeah.
Have you considered, you know, and it's now making me think, hold on a minute, this guy's got a point. He's got something else to add. He's not just dismissed me. It continues. Yeah.
Of course. So, usually we're running out of time, and there's two more that I want to cover. Safety to contribute. And, you know, while we're talking about safety to contribute, who would like to contribute around how we can make it safe for everyone to contribute? Encouraging and facilitating diverse, out-of-the-box perspectives for people to bring in perspectives that others don't want to look at or are not being shared in kind of the mainstream narrative. How do we get even the quiet, silent voices, the ones sat in the corner, to share their opinions? Who's got something you'd like to contribute, particularly someone that hasn't shared so far today? Jorge, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Jorge and Fahim, you've got your hands up, so yeah, jump in when you're ready.
Yeah, I think is also responsibility of the group to look around and see who is not participating and who is a little bit more shy, and ask them directly if they want to participate in something.
Of course, and whether that's an individual or an underrepresented group in society, I absolutely agree. Who isn't having their voices heard? Who could use a platform to be able to express themselves? I really like that. Thank you, Jorge. Fahim, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah. I think it's important about the language you use, without offending anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So the language you use, I guess, also making it welcoming, encouraging people to contribute, rewarding that rather than shutting it down. Yeah, absolutely. We've got a few other hands up. If I just get to that screen, Anna and Beverly, you've got your hands up as well, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, hi, it's Anna.
Hi, Anna.
I just there's been a few. I'm not going to go back over it because I know you're short of time, but there's been a few things that I do disagree with that's been going on in the session. But I won't go into it because we've not got time. But when it comes to safe to contribute, I feel like you do actually need to set up the rules about what is safe, And if I come from a background of prisons and working with violent people, and you do need to set the tone of what is acceptable, and that is by setting out rules. So if I was one of my rules is, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from its consequences. If you say something awful, expect to be held accountable for that, and in doing so you make it safe for everybody else to contribute, because you're making it very clear that if somebody comes in with misogyny or sexism, or somebody decides that actually rape is an acceptable topic to be talking about, or that they're encouraging that kind of behavior, it is absolutely important that you make it very clear to everybody else who's in a vicinity or in the group that that is not acceptable, and that you do shut that down, and you do demonstrate that that is not welcome in society or in the group that you're in. So I do just think that when we're asking these questions, we're maybe imagining these ideal situations where we're in a classroom full of people that are from our backgrounds that understand what being quote unquote a decent human being is. But the fact of the matter is, if it doesn't stand the test of you standing in a room full of potentially violent people who've been socialized in a very poor way, not had the best start in life, and that doesn't stand the test, then it's not correct. We need to set the rules so that everybody understands where we're starting from.
Absolutely, Anna. I would love to have a conversation with you, because I've worked in the prison service several times over the last 20 years and worked with people from very, very challenging backgrounds. And I absolutely agree with you. There does need to be a framing, a safe container that's created. And actually, everything we're talking about is what we've been doing in this session. You will remember at the beginning of the session, I talked about the ground rules, right? Which were put up on screen, where we had an opportunity to kind of establish some parameters that we all agreed to. So I actually agree with everything you're saying. And, in different settings, you may approach it in a slightly different way, but the content will change. The context doesn't. And part of this is how you also get the group to self-regulate, because the moment you start telling people what's right, what's wrong, what to do and what not to do, regardless of who they are, you're creating this kind of power hierarchy. Whereas actually, if we want people to participate and be a part of the solution, we need the group to self-regulate, whoever they are. Exactly. And this model does work even with people that have been in very challenging backgrounds, including the prison service, because when you get that self-regulation happening, we're not creating a power dynamic where the group are regulating itself. So I'd love to pick up that conversation and share some of the work that we've done in that area before. And this is really what we are hoping for, is a society that regulates itself, rather than people say what's right, what's wrong, what you can and can't do, where we've got to a point where we know that between us. And I think someone, I can't remember if it was Chris or someone, that said that call it out, or I can't remember what the phrase was. Well, it doesn't need someone that is instigating or driving that change where everyone's calling out. We can all say, no, that's not okay. You don't need someone in a position of authority to do that. As a group, we will not accept behavior which obviously is creating psychologically unsafe environment. So yeah, it's a good point. I really appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's regarding sort of the safety to contribution. Is every voice is welcome, everyone's opinion is valid, but we also got to the point where the group's self-regulating as well. And the last one is this, the safety to challenge. If you don't agree, that's okay, that's good, that's welcome. But rather than coming with problems, encouraging people to come with solutions, providing constructive feedback or constructive dissent. We have a culture where people can feedback. We're imploring leadership to role model psychological safety, and leadership isn't people that are in positions of corporate or political authority. We should be teaching children to be leaders. Leadership is something that we should be developing in every human being, not for the few that end up in positions of authority, because that's where we create true power. Power literally means the ability to do or act. We want more people that are empowered to do or act in a way that contributes to positive change. Because, you know, when it's concentrated in the hands of a few, then we are not creating a culture that is for everyone. And this is really where, for me, it's really important that we consider, how do we get to the point where it is safe to challenge? Anyone got any points or thoughts to share on what can we do to encourage people to feel comfortable to challenge, to encourage them to feel challenged? Anyone got anything to share on that? Stephen, go for it. We'll take your share and we're going to start wrapping up. So we've only got a few minutes left.
I think something about setting the tone yourself, be the change you want to see.
Absolutely.
If you do that, it get almost, I don't like using the phrase, but it's giving people permission. It creates a space where it's more likely to happen because people feel, well, he's doing it, I can do it as well. So.
Yeah, actually inviting it, welcoming it, not to be seen as a negative. You know, often we see people that are challenging as awkward or uncomfortable or dissenting voices. Dissenting has often been viewed as a bad thing, whereas actually we should be encouraging it. It's a positive thing. Particularly, it's not what you do, it's the intention you do it with. Particularly if the intention is, I want to create positive change. Okay, so also bear in mind, if you focus too much on one of these stages, you might not necessarily get a culture of psychological safety. Or if it's all about challenging, but there is no growth and learning, if it's all about contribution, but there is no inclusivity, we might not build the picture of psychological safety that we desire. So this is really why it's really important that you have time invested for all of these different areas. So these are some questions for you to reflect on to take this forward. We're here to plant a seed. There is no way in the world that we're going to be able to deliver the whole picture in an hour. But there's some questions for you to reflect on over the coming days. Why should we, as human beings, and in our capacity, in our communities, in our families, in our workplaces, invest in psychological safety? And why is it that you would want to be psychologically safe? Why do you want to be a psychologically safe person? If you are interested in learning more about this, if you want to bring this into your organization, feel free to reach out. You can book in a call with ourselves. We're happy to talk to you about how we can support you in taking this forward. You know, our success measures are how many people we've helped and how much of a difference in the world we've made. By turning up today, you contributed to that. But if you'd like to continue the conversation, there is a link that's just been put in the chat by my lovely colleague, Janni, where you can book in a call. We do also have a program, Mental Health Champions program, where we will train you on how you can lead this culture of change. We've got many of our champions here in the house. If you're a champion, if you stick your hand up or let us know that you're here. The last cohort that finished last week, we've got lots of them here in the room. So thank you so much for turning. Oh, the last couple of cohorts. It's good to see so many of you here. We are building a global community of mental health champions. We would love for you to join that. The next course, the public course, is starting in February, but we can also offer in-house versions of this as well. We have literally got a minute left. I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes. If anyone has any questions, comments, anything you'd like to discuss or share before we finish, feel free to stay on. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Alan's comment. Chris, you're safe to step in. Love that idea. I'll be borrowing that. Appreciate that. We'll credit you for it. But as I said, like any questions, comments, feedback, anything you'd like to discuss and share before you leave, I will hang out for as long as I need to. Shahana, I see you've got your hand up, and Fahim, you've got your hand up as well. So if you'd like to share or ask questions, jump in. For those of you who can't stay, I'd just like to raise your hand like so. Give yourselves a pat on the back. You've invested an hour of your valuable lives in being here in this session. Really appreciate you being here. And as I said, I will be hanging out to have a chat. If any of you would like to share anything, unmute yourself. Jump on at any point. Rob, I can see you've got your hand up as well. Jump in.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to. I was just thinking about, you know, when we're talking about what would work, what kind of environment we'd like to, you know, help create. It's useful to think about what the barriers are, why that hasn't or doesn't happen in organisations or political institutions, etc. And just think about some of the barriers being a defensiveness and I guess ego and a fear of being wrong that is very much part of our culture, and that you kind of have to acknowledge that we all have to acknowledge our own fear of being wrong or not knowing the answer, because when we're talking about a culture of open communication and you know, sort of constructive criticism, we have to accept that means that people will sometimes say something that isn't comfortable for us to hear, maybe because someone else knows something we don't, or maybe someone else has got it right and we've got it wrong, and we have to be willing to challenge our own assumptions. And I think that is one of the barriers that exists in institutions and in within politics. It's obviously rife, that defensiveness, that willing, you know, the sort of the fear of basically getting things wrong or being seen to be wrong. So I just wanted to make that.
It's an important point. I think I'm not sure like how if I fully agree with this, but to a degree I do. Someone once said to me, freedom of speech is hearing something you don't agree or like from someone that you don't like. And it's like, okay, to a degree I understand that, because actually sometimes hearing things that you don't agree with or make you uncomfortable force you to look at things, right? That's how change happens. If enough of us were forced to look at things that are uncomfortable, hopefully collectively we can find a better way forward. And you know, growth happens outside the comfort zone, right? If every conversation we had was comfortable, there would be no growth. So I actually agree with that. What you're saying is important. So are we willing to be uncomfortable? Are we willing to be challenged? Are we willing to look at our own reactions? Because I'm going to be honest with you, there's many times in my life I've been wrong, where I held firmly held beliefs which have been brought into question, and I have grown by understanding and exploring and getting uncomfortable, and then finding a new belief as a result of that.
Yeah. And I think, a part of that is acceptance, isn't it? Accepting that none of us are perfect, none of us have all the answers, none of us have all, you know, are the font of all knowledge, but it's okay, that's fine, you know, and other people might do, but we can learn from each other. That's part of the spirit, I suppose.
And also we've got to consider that, you know, if we talk about even a couple of hundred years ago, what everyone believed to be true based on the information that we had as a collective is completely fundamentally wrong. Everything we believe might be turned on its head in the next 50 to 100 years as we advance as a species, as we maybe start to explore interstellar travel and learn more about the universe and realize actually everything we believed is complete nonsense. I don't know. So we need to be willing to let go of everything we believe. And that's what this process is about, is our willingness to let go of firmly held beliefs.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. I know it's a big subject and an hour is nowhere enough time to do it justice, but I appreciate kind of everyone's contribution.
Thank you very much anyway. It's really stimulating. Yeah, cheers.
Appreciate that, Rob. Thank you.
Right.
Still quite a few of you left. Anyone else like to share any questions, comments, anything you'd like to feed back?